Hi everyone, and I'm making a video for this week, week 8. It's going awfully fast, um, and we just went through the creation week, and I think I wanted to just sort of comment on the idea of creation stories. Really, um, I think perhaps it's time to talk about the Book of Nature. And I just wanted to say that so there's different approaches to knowing nature, and I don't, I know it seems like I'm criticizing science very often, and that I'm not okay. I'm definitely not anti-science, but the reason I spend a lot of effort trying to criticize science is that and to kind of illuminate what these criticisms might be. And we're in these 2 weeks, which is one of which was the critique of modern science, um, is because it seems to me that's what's needed. In other words, we have to sort of we have to kind of explode, get underneath the authority that science has in order to see it truly, sort of face on, and then to sort of recover our own kind of agency in creating our worldview, our own worldview, how we want to see the world, and and actually giving ourselves permission to see the world how it seems right to us to see the world from our own kind of our own kind of source of truth that we might have, which it could appear that science has dismissed or undermined or discredited the possibility of coming from an inner source, a subjective source, uh, to form a worldview, and that one has to be evidence-based kind of thing. So that's the source of the critique. But it seems to me that one thing that this creation stories bring out. So the creation story that science has produced is not metaphorical, right? Obviously, it's not an allegory. It is meant to be the literal truth of what actually happened. And so, and um, so let's just think about this. Uh, Say I would think of the universe as a book. Okay, I'm going to be going somewhere with this analogy. But say the universe is a book. So this is a metaphor or an analogy. And I'm reading that book. Okay. And this is rather like the music example with the signal that I gave you. And I'm reading this book, and now we don't know what kind of book it is, but we've got different ways we can go out reading a book, and you guys will know at this point that whether one is reading a book of fiction or a spiritual text, it's most and in fact it's given our language, it is impossible to not use metaphor. Our language is just based on metaphor. We have to have it to convey meaning to anyone else. So if you're reading this book, and it's the book of the cosmos, right? But just imagine you're reading an actual book. So then let's say I tried to read that book literally. We can talk about this with respect to the Bible, for example, like the story of Genesis in the Bible. I'm going to read it literally. I'm going to take it as being literally true. So I read the book literally. And and that's going to put me in a very strange position, is it not? Right? imagine reading Genesis literally. Okay, it puts me in a very strange position, and in fact, it gives me, if I'm going to use my reading of this book to understand something, to gain understanding and information and meaning, then I'm going to have a very kind of strange. I'm going to come up with a very strange set of meanings, aren't I? I mean, to read Genesis literally is going to give me a really kind of odd sense of what it's actually saying if I try and read it literally. And the bottom line is, even though there's been a great emphasis, really since the Reformation on literal readings of the Bible. So prior to the Reformation, reading of the Bible was the emphasis was on an allegorical reading of the Bible. People thought that it was metaphor, that the things said in the Bible pointed to the truth, but they weren't the truth themselves, if you see what I mean. And it's odd because, and then since the Reformation has been like, and even in Catholicism, because of the pressure, the force of the Reformation, it sort of pushed things towards trying to read the Bible literally, try and stick to what it really meant, kind of thing. And I think obviously that has created some strangeness within the realm of Christianity, and I do think there was a little bit more sanity or intelligence involved prior to the Reformation, even though I'm sure that the Reformation in many ways was completely needed. But read in the case of that book, or actually any book, you go try it, pull a book off the shelf, and try and read it literally. Okay, and I don't care even if it's non-fiction. You're going to have to. The person who wrote it is going to be using metaphor on every single page. It's going to be full of metaphor. It's just the way our language works. So, a literal reading is really not actually possible. It's not possible to do literal readings of things. So it's an idea that we have. Now let's go back to the analogy of the universe as a book. The universe as a book. The scientific view, essentially, one could think of it perhaps as it's a literal reading of that book. If the book of the universe, this metaphorical book of the universe, we're going to try and read it literally. We're going to try and say what literally happened. And here's this sort of huge distinction. The other creation stories that you guys looked at are not literal readings of the book of the universe, right? They're metaphorical readings. What does a metaphor do? It points to something beyond itself. It points to a meaning, and that word is very important, beyond itself. So these other creation stories are essentially an attempt to divine meaning from the cosmos, right? So these stories are a meaning. They're meaning-finding stories, right? They create meaning. They're reading the book of the cosmos as metaphorical, allegorical, which doesn't make them any less true. Now, if you take a book that's full of metaphor and try and read it literally, you're going to end up with essentially garbage, right? So if the book of the cosmos is in fact metaphorical, then reading it literally is going to create a great misunderstanding. That's a big if, of course. You could say, well, it's not metaphorical. It's the physical thing. But if there were meaning behind the cosmos, contained within the cosmos, then to read it literally would be to miss that meaning, right? And so for science, the scientific creation story to have any value whatsoever, really, I think, one would have to say, well, we're living in a cosmos that was without meaning. We don't have to have a metaphorical reading of the book of the cosmos. We can read it literally. because it's a meaningless cosmos. But if it's a meaningful cosmos, then to read that book literally would be to leave, well, first of all, it would be to grossly mislead yourself as to what to derive from the book of the cosmos. But second of all, you'd miss the depth, the meaning, which is the most important thing, right? The cosmos. The details, the superficial details, are not the most important thing. These metaphors then would point to meanings, and the point is to get the meaning. That's the point, right? And all of these creation stories, except for the Western one, take the universe that way. So, so then you could sort of ask the question then, and I have asked this question quite to myself quite a bit. What would happen if we take the scientific version of the creation of the universe metaphorically? I mean, is there a way we could take it metaphorically? In other words, within it, there's a sort of a meaning hidden. And I'm throwing that question out to you. I don't want to try to go there with it, but it's a worthy contemplation. It's like, we'll say it's actually a metaphor, that what we've sort of discovered here is really metaphorical. In fact, all of the discoveries of science are metaphorical. And you know that I think, I don't know if we've gone through it in this course, the Zen story of the finger pointing at the moon, right? So it's like words are like a finger pointing at the moon, essentially. Okay, truth is beyond the truth that's contained in these words is beyond the words themselves. So if you look at the finger, then you don't see the moon that they're pointing to, right? So it's like, what if we treat the scientific creation story as a finger pointing at the moon? Don't get lost in the details of the story. Think more about looking where they point, to the bright moon in the sky that these metaphors are pointing to. In other words, to a reality that it might point to. And I think that's a worthy contemplation to do, because then that would put this creation story on the same footing as the other creation stories. It would make it as a search for meaning and not simply a set of details that are meaningless, and produce a story that appears as though it's full of meaningless coincidences, which that's what happens. The reason I have you look at that Big History movie is that they use this word, lucky break. I mean, give us a break, right? Give us a break. It's like all of these lucky breaks. That's your story. That's what you've got, that we have lucky breaks. I mean, come on, you can do better than that, can't you? Well, no, actually you can't. To read the story superficially, without the level of meaning, produces a story that is full of coincidence, essentially. It's just endless coincidence upon coincidence, lucky break upon lucky break. That's all you've got. And that's what happens when you try and read something literally that has a deeper level of meaning, right? Now, some people call that deeper level of meaning God or Creator. We don't have to do that. But we've missed a deeper level of meaning, and what that means is that we come up with a story that is sort of nonsensical, if you see what I mean. It's like we have to produce a story that is full of things that actually appear to be quite stupid. Like saying this was a lucky break and that was a lucky break, and God, this was the hugest lucky break of all time. And it puts us in a position of making up a story that is incoherent and not even really human. And I'm not saying that the physical details of the story are wrong. They may be, but I'm not saying that they are. It's just that in terms of explaining our own existence and coming to a view of who we are and how we got here, in terms of giving us a way that we should look at the cosmos and our place in it and how we should live in the cosmos, it gives us nothing except for lucky breaks. Okay, so it is worthy of criticism. We have to criticize that because because it's very authoritative, this story, and the question in our minds always has to be, well, what's missing? Now, it's very interesting to know, and I may send you material on this. Hopefully, I'll remember and dig out some material on this. But there was this prior to even a couple of hundred years ago. There was a very strong idea that, and this idea emerged probably in like the 1st and 2nd century AD, but it may have been around prior to that. But there was this. It was the idea that there was a thing called the Book of Nature, not a literal book. So this was a metaphorical idea, and I've got a quote that I'll send you from St. Augustine. He says, well, there's 2 great books to read. There's the book of Scripture, and by the way, back then he was very into reading it allegorically, but we've also got the Book of Nature. We look around. It's like, what's better than this book in order to understand or know God? It's like these very things that have been created are a book we can read metaphorically, right? So there was the idea of the Book of Nature, and the Book of Nature, that was a strong idea that existed for 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years, and only in the last couple, 200-300 years has it sort of disappeared. I didn't even know about this idea of the Book of Nature until recently, but it was a really, really prominent idea throughout most of our history. Well, and it was this idea that the appearance of things was metaphorical, allegorical, that there was a meaning contained in the world. The meaning was contained in the world, as well as in the Bible, right? So the one would walk around the world and be being exposed to meaning, and it's like, well, let's work on what that meaning might be. But for me, I'm not really particularly interested in specific meanings. What it says to me is that idea of the Book of Nature that existed is that the world was to them meaningful. In other words, the world that we live in is full of meaning. Okay, and that's to me, in my own experience, that is a perceptual experience. You can walk around the world and you can feel that it's meaningful. I'm not saying it has a specific meaning, but you get the sense that it's full of meaning. It's meaningful. And of course, that is the way an indigenous person sees the world, right? Native Americans, it's everything. You go on a hike with a Native American, and it's every single thing that happens or comes across your path, even a fly lying on a rock. It has some kind of meaning. It means something. It's like nothing is happening without it being meaningful. It's a really, really different world to live in, a world of meaning, a meaningful world. So what happens when you create a creation story through science, and the creation story is as you saw it in big history, then you have to create a meaningless story. How do you make a story meaningless? You say that it's due to random chance. That's how you make it meaningless. Anything that happens is not due to something meaningful. There's nothing mean. It's because it just happened like that. Random chance. That's just the way it happened. Really improbable, but there you go. That's what happened, And then the next thing too, and the next thing, and the next thing. Everything is random chance. Everything is a random coming together of things in highly improbable ways. It's the only way to take meaning out of that story is to make these things random, right? So now I do think that I'm being very critical, obviously, but from this is from a perspective view. It's possible that we do live in a meaningless universe. Okay, in which case closed. But none of us think we do, right? Because for very significant reasons, real reasons, actually. So, and you have to do this sort of speculation. If we do live in a meaningful universe, then what do we do when we interpret it via the literal reading of science, right? We create a misjudgment, a serious misjudgment, and we miss also the actual meaning. So you're reading your book, right, and you're trying to read it literally. Well, everything that's in that book basically is missed. The whole point of the book, any story or wisdom contained in that book is completely missed. So, so if for some bizarre reason we suspect that we live in a meaningful universe, then if we suspect it and then we create a story via this method that tries to make it meaningless, then you create a story that basically is nonsensical and that is full of, or has to be full of random chance. It's the only way to take meaning out of the story. Okay. So that's, I guess, what I wanted to say based on last week. Once we're going into a little bit more this week, I hope to send you material on the Book of Nature, just a little background on it, would be good to send. And then I also want to send you a chapter from Ken Wilber, or either that, or I'm going to send you a list of quotations from the scientists that basically developed quantum theory, and these should be very eye-opening quotes from these scientists. And that's that. Your posts are fantastic, and don't forget to bring in personal experience. It's like I'm just going to be a broken record, and I just hope at some point you guys listen to me. Every single question in this course can be answered from the perspective of personal experience, and then it's made even better if you add in your thinking and references to external material. But I mean, there's nothing that goes on in this course that isn't amenable to you bringing in your personal experience as part of your evidence, as part of telling us why you think the way you do. So you don't have to make logical arguments are great, but backed up by personal experience, much more so. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing well, and I'll see if anything more comes to me to say this week. All right, bye.